Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. A man serving quarantine after arriving from Nigeria becomes Hong Kong's third Omicron patient. SAR residents residing on the mainland will be able to cast their ballots at 3 border poll booths next month. And body task to accreditate overseas medical schools aims to publish its first 20 institutions by March next year. A fully vaccinated man arriving from Nigeria is Hong Kong's third COVID patient with the Omicron variant. But authorities insisted none of these cases were exposed to the community, and plans to reopen the city's border with the mainland are moving ahead as scheduled. Johanna Chan reports.
As global scientists race to seek answers on Omicron, the Hong Kong government is taking no chances on the mutated COVID variant. Health Chief Sophia Chan announced that arrivals from countries which have reported community infections of Omicron will be subject to extra quarantine rules. Apart from designating these countries as high risk, the arrivals will be isolated for 21 days, the first 7 of which at Penny's Bay Quarantine Center, followed by 2 weeks at a hotel. This arrangement is already in force for arrivals from 8 African nations. Authorities explained why it may not be feasible to have arrivals stay at Penny's Bay for 3 weeks.
So at present, we consider there's enough capacity to deal with the people coming from the 8 countries. But we expect that there may be more countries affected in the future. So we hope we can have a more sustainable system to cater for this kind of enhanced monitoring measures that for the Omicron variant. So because of this, we have implemented a 7 + 14 days measures.
The government also announced a third imported Omicron case, a 37-year-old man arriving from Nigeria last Wednesday through Ethiopia and Thailand. He was staying at Ramada Grandview Hotel in North Point when he tested positive on Friday. He was asymptomatic and had 2 Moderna jabs early last month. But Chan emphasized that the emergence of Omicron will not scuttle the SAR's plans to reopen its border with the mainland.
Hong Kong's very stringent system of boarding requirements, quarantine, and also testing has successfully stopped the transmission of the 3 cases. So we do not see that there is major issues affecting such preparation work right now. But of course, Hong Kong would continue to monitor the global situation.
The city also logged 3 imported cases today, all of whom carried the L452R variant. Johanna Chan, HKIBC.
Global leaders are not taking any chances either, as the newly discovered COVID variant spreads to over a dozen countries. More states continue to isolate African nations, and some have even shut their doors to all foreigners. Wong reports.
In just a matter of weeks, the Omicron variant has managed to make its way to at least 14 countries, and the list keeps growing. World leaders have been quick to shut their doors against travelers from southern Africa, where most cases have been concentrated. But African leaders are calling on the international community to stop with the isolation and stigmatization.
We were concerned that there seemed to have been attempts to stigmatize the variant and the country where it was detected. Detection in this case was treated as origination, which again should not be an issue, even if the variant would have originated in Botswana.
We call upon these countries that have imposed travel bans on our country and our other Southern African sister countries to immediately and urgently reverse their decisions and lift the bans they have imposed before any further damage is done on our economies and to the livelihoods of our people. There is no scientific justification whatsoever for keeping these restrictions in place.
Ramaphosa also said rich countries need to stop fueling vaccine inequality. Meanwhile, some nations are taking it a step further. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced that starting tomorrow, all foreigners will be banned from entering the country. Citizens coming from over 20 nations where the Omicron variant has been found will need to go through stricter quarantine measures. Japan joins Israel and Morocco in keeping all non-residents out. The World Health Organization has deemed Omicron a variant of concern, but it remains unclear what its over 50 mutations mean, with health experts saying they need more time to figure them out. Wong, HKIBC.
Back locally, Hong Kong residents living on the mainland will be able to vote at 3 locations in next month's Legislative Council elections. The vote counting process will not entertain public viewing due to social distancing measures, but authorities insist it is still open and transparent. Lee reports.
Border checkpoints in Heung Yun Wai, Lo Wu and Lok Ma Chau will transform into polling stations on election day next month. They will serve Hong Kongers living on the mainland who can't come back to make their Legislative Council picks due to COVID border restrictions. To use these stations, people will need to go online and register in advance. The registration period starts on Wednesday and will last for a week. A total of 111,000 slots will be available for booking across the 3 stations. Voters will need to follow strict anti-epidemic measures before crossing the border, such as presenting a negative nucleic acid test and a green health code. But this also means they will be exempted from quarantine if they return to the mainland immediately after voting. This special arrangement only applies to casting ballots for the geographical and functional constituencies. Those voting in the election committee sector will still have to make full trips back to Hong Kong. Authorities also said only people who hold ordinary residence can take part, but did not clarify how they will verify this.
The REO, the Registration and Electoral Office, they have established a mechanism to check in every voters registration cycle whether the voters, they are still ordinary residents in Hong Kong, are still eligible as voters. And if they found that the voters, they are no longer ordinary residents in Hong Kong, of course, they will take necessary action. As a matter of fact, every year we have tens of thousands of voters. They are not regarded as ordinary residents in Hong Kong, and their registration are cancelled for that reason.
Tsang also brushed aside concerns over a closed-door counting process.
It's simply because of we try to minimize the risk of infection. So after consulting the EAC, we all think that the existing arrangement that those candidates and their agents are being invited to attend the counting process is an appropriate arrangement, which the fairness and transparency can be guaranteed.
Tsang did not answer that question. Lee, HKIBC.
2 pro-democracy activists who have gone on self-exile are wanted by the anti-graft body for allegedly calling on Hong Kong people to boycott the Legislative Council polls. The ICAC issued arrest warrants for former lawmaker Ted Hui and former district councillor Yao Man-chun. Hui and Yao, who are now in Australia and Britain respectively, were accused of breaching the elections ordinance since late October. Their social media posts have been cited as evidence. A government-appointed committee tasked to draw up a list of recognized overseas medical schools held its first meeting today. It aims to accreditate around 20 institutions by early next year and up to 100 eventually. And Lau reports.
Members of the Special Registration Committee arrived at the Hong Kong Academy of Medicine in Wong this evening for their first meeting. The 10-strong committee was set up after the Legislative Council passed a bill that allowed overseas trained doctors to practice in the city. They also do not need to sit local licensing exams. The group now need to draft a global list of eligible universities from which these incoming doctors must have obtained their certification. Speaking after the meeting, committee chairwoman Grace Tang said these institutions should have the same teaching quality and international standing as the city's 2 medical schools. She said it would be better if courses at these academies are taught in English, but it will not be a requisite requirement. That means universities on the mainland would also be considered. Another meeting has been set for January next year, and the first batch of 20 recognized institutions could be published in March before the list grows to around 100. Annie Lau, HKIBC.
Chief Executive Carrie today kicked off her 4-day trip to Hubei by visiting a Hong Kong-funded hospital in Wuhan. The SAR delegation, which also included Chief Secretary John Lee, was given a tour at the hospital. Lam thanked the medical staff for their anti-epidemic work in the past 2 years. She praised the mainland's small district containment strategy, but conceded Hong Kong couldn't employ the same tactic as it is freer and more open. Lam then went to a smart car company before meeting Hubei authorities in the afternoon. And coming up after the break. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen welcomes Baltic lawmakers in latest diplomatic show of force. And labor unions are up in arms against a plan by Kai Tak Sports Park to import construction workers.